Welcome, everyone, to our new year. It's 2021, and we just had a few things to talk about as an introductory podcast to this year. Myself, Bart Sympathy. I'd like to introduce our other two members of the media editor group for the American Journal of Psychiatry. Barrington, how are you doing?
Doing all right.
Great. And Priya?
Hey, everyone. Nice to be back for this kind of mid-year media editor podcast together.
Awesome. And I just wanted to mention that, again, our podcasts are for educational purposes only. Some of the things that we'll be talking about today include recent current events, the pandemic, and things of that nature. Barrington and Priya, what have you guys been up to recently?
It's interesting you mentioned the pandemic. I know it's been really tough and a change of lifestyle for all of us. And I know with the pandemic, with the vaccine coming out, I hope that everyone will get one. What about you, Priya? Anything else been on your mind?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of the vaccine. Obviously, it's a little bit colder now that it's winter time, but still trying to get outside as much as possible. Went on a run earlier today, actually. I think the more we can get ourselves outside in nature, being around fresh air, trees, parks, the better for the mental and physical health. So hopefully everybody's able to access that as much as they can.
Yeah, and I definitely agree there. Social isolation has been a huge issue, with the pandemic. A lot of people have been working at home. It's harder to see friends and family. Identifying hobbies, exercise, anything like that to really kind of help out in terms of your emotional and physical health is very valuable during this time. I don't know how it is in Tennessee and on the East Coast for you guys, but the pandemic and the surge here has been pretty brutal. As I'm sure many of our listeners are aware, in LA, there's 0 ICU beds, and up here, there's very few percentage of ICU beds left. And the holidays really contributed to this surge. And I hope that, the community is slowly realizing that social gatherings, even if they're just 4 or 5 people, can really be harmful in terms of coronavirus spread. And I think we're slowly realizing that through the holiday season.
Absolutely.
I also know the recent violence in DC, an indicator of a lot of things going on. I know the APA has an official position statement, but I just know there's a lot of people hurting out there, and it can be really tough.
For my outpatient therapy experience, it's already come up with some of the patients that I've talked to. I don't know about you guys, if the DC violence has already been kind of a factor contributing to anxiety in terms of your outpatient work with patients.
Well, I'm doing third year right now, which is primarily entirely outpatient. And I think, not just this past week with DC violence, but just this whole year has been really, really challenging for folks. Like we talked about social isolation and not having access to groups or activities or school or other things that, really were keeping people kind of integrated into some sort of routine and behavioral activation, if you will, adding, unfortunately, more stress on an already really stressful last 10 to 12 months. And I'm just hoping that people stay hopeful. I think that is an important thing to keep in mind. There's light at the end of this really long tunnel, and it's not going to be like this forever.
Absolutely. And I kind of wanted to build off some of the things you had said there. Not having school has been a huge issue for children, but I've also noticed the geriatric population has been suffering quite greatly as well. I'm on my geriatric rotation right now, and patients have pretty much said they felt like they're shackled to their house. Being older, potentially more susceptible to the harmful effects of coronavirus, not being able to see their friends has really taken a toll and actually kind of contributed towards worsening symptoms of mental health. So I think, the vaccine rollout is positive, and the tier-based system in which we're working towards, I hope we can kind of quicken the speed and hopefully get everyone vaccinated to the point where there's herd immunity and we eventually kind of transition back to somewhat normalcy.
For sure. shifting gears a little bit, I really appreciated, Bharat, how you talked about psychoanalysis last semester and kind of went into a little more details of what that might look like for trainees and definitely with sports as well as the perspectives from our athlete.
Yeah, it's interesting. We touch on it. I did the first one with a sports psychiatrist and the second one, Priya and I interviewed an athlete who had struggled with depression and anxiety while she played volleyball. And it's a field that was forgotten, sports and mental health in sports. And I think was something that was undervalued in the past, but sports psychiatry as a field is growing rapidly. And people are realizing that no matter how good you are at a sport, you're still a human being and mental health doesn't discriminate. And I'm glad we were able to shed some light on that.
Yeah. I really liked your podcast, Priya, on perinatal psychiatry as well and what that may look like for individuals. Did you have any thoughts for the podcast over the past few months, Priya?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun actually interviewing Dr. Raffi for that one. But I really enjoyed actually Barrington yours with Dr. Cheryl Fleisch about homeless psychiatry and her work with the populations around Nashville. I thought she was just incredibly inspirational and just does beautiful work. Bharat, I again loved the podcast you did with Dr. Gorin about psychodynamics, psychoanalysis, psychiatry. I thought she did a really good job of very simply describing kind of what is a conceptually difficult to understand type of therapy, I think, sometimes. So I'd encourage our listeners to take a listen to those if they haven't already.
When you think of psychodynamics and psychoanalysis, you think of people, laying down with their eyes closed and the psychiatrist behind them, which is a form of psychoanalysis, but there's multiple forms of psychodynamic psychiatry. So would definitely suggest that people take a listen to that just, to kind of understand the nuances between psychodynamic and psychoanalytic psychiatry. I really enjoyed your guys' podcast as well, like Barrington, your podcast on seasonal affective disorder. I'd always thought that, and in literature too, or like just textbooks, you always think about, depression in the fall and winter, or that's at least what I thought when I thought of seasonal affective disorder. And I didn't really realize that you can have manic episodes that would kind of be brought about by seasonal changes, and that people can also have seasonal affective disorder in the summer as well due to the heat. And Priya, your podcast on QTC prolongation was great, kind of just to review what QTC prolongation is and why we're concerned about it and some of the medications that we look for QTC prolongation. It was great because it's something that we come across antidepressants and antipsychotics, and it was a very educational podcast. So I really enjoyed those two.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we've had a lot of really interesting episodes this past 6 months, and I think we wanted to take a chance now to highlight some of the upcoming ones. Barrington, do you have anything to share for what's to come?
Yeah, I should have one on addiction. We'll have another episode on sports, and then maybe evolutionary psychiatry, and then solastalgia, the chronic distress related to climate change. What about y'all?
For me, I recorded a neuromodulation and interventional psychiatry podcast with Dr. Phillip over at Brown University. And it was a really interesting look at TMS, RTDS, ECT, and some of the other popular interventional psychiatric methods that we're using today and their efficacy. And then Barrington and I also recorded a podcast on eating disorders with some of my faculty here at my home program, and some of the behavioral management and side effects or physical symptoms and lab-based symptoms to look at when you have someone on the inpatient ward with anorexia or bulimia. So those are two to look out for as well. Priya?
Those all sound great, guys. Just recorded one actually with Dr. Ken Duckworth. He's the Chief Medical Officer of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we talked about community psychiatry and his work with NAMI over the years. Really excited to have that one roll out. I think trainees hopefully will find it really interesting. So kind of shifting gears again, as always, everyone feel free to come reach out with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube for the American Journal of Psychiatry Residence Journal. We also had our December issue of the journal come out last month, so feel free to take a look at some of those articles. Those are available online, and it's free to access.
Yeah, I saw some interesting articles on Kratom, code status, and we even had a lawyer write about his reflections on an assignment to write a memorandum on a child custody battle. So a lot of cool stuff to check out.
Yeah, and if y'all are more interested and you're a psychiatry resident in an ACGME accredited program here and you would like to serve on an editorial board, feel free to apply. We've got some call for editors coming out in that issue and look forward to seeing any potential applications as well. Feel free to check out our most recent issue for the specifics on this. Great. Well, I appreciate y'all giving me y'all's time and y'all listeners as well.
Yeah, it's always nice to touch base with you guys, since we're pretty much a national editorial board. We've got people all over the country, so it's always fun to record these podcasts, and I hope you guys are doing well.
Same to you guys. Hopefully one of these days we'll be able to meet in person.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
See y'all.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.